Chapter 3 The Studio of Broken Dreams. Mariah wiped the ink from her mouth and glanced around her surroundings. She found herself near what appeared to be a huge puddle of ink. The area surrounding her was worn wood and some yellow debris, reminiscent of an old cartoon. Ink dripped from the ceiling, seemingly seeping through the walls. As Maria looked down at herself, the wood creaked beneath her weight as she stood up. Although she wasn't injured, she didn't feel completely okay. Her body was smeared with ink. Where am I? Maria wondered aloud, searching for any sign of familiarity. Suddenly, a terrible screech erupted from a speaker, followed by a voice that sounded eerily familiar. It was Wilson's.
Children of the machine, it is I, the man who killed the ink demon. Among you there are two strangers, two girls. Find them and bring them to me.
Wilson commanded before the speaker fell silent. Children of the machine? What? She pondered. He must have been referring to Audrey and herself. Maria looked around again, desperately trying to spot Audrey, but all she could see were the yellowed walls and floors, a table with a chair, and a crumpled, slightly torn piece of paper. Curiosity piqued. She walked over to the paper and picked it up to read its contents.
Dear Henry Stein, 30 years do slip away, don't they? Come by the old workshop. I would like to show you something. Your pal, Joey Drew.
She reread the note several times before pausing, trying to remember why the name Henry sounded so familiar. She realized that this Henry had the same last name as hers. Pondering where she might have heard the name Henry Stein, her thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a loud crashing sound. Quickly, she tucked the memo into her pocket and cautiously went to investigate the noise's source. As Maria wandered through the rundown building, she noticed something written on the wall. It read, "The Studio of Broken Dreams." It felt unsettling. She pressed forward, ducking under some wooden planks, and caught sight of a man who looked familiar. He had slicked back hair that was a mixture of black and yellow, pale skin, a mustache, and wore a striped vest and pants. The dress shoes also seemed recognizable. Mr. Drew? Maria asked, unsure of herself. The man turned to her, slightly surprised to see her there. It was none other than Joey Drew himself.
I'm afraid that's who I am.
He sighed, appearing tired. "You're the man behind Bendy, the little devil everyone adores," she said, pausing as she noticed the way Joey looked at her with remorse.
I'm not the one behind him. An old friend of mine created Bendy for the cartoons and I took the credit.
Joey admitted.
You know, your father was a good man, very creative and intelligent. You bear a resemblance to him.
Maria paused. If Joey wasn't the true creator of the demon, then who was? What did her father have to do with any of this? She couldn't remember her father, but she knew her mother had told her stories about him when she was younger. What are you talking about? You're Joey Drew, my best friend's dad. What do you mean? Maria tried to ask, but Joey interrupted her.
I'm not the Joey you may have heard about in the real world. I'm just an ink replica, a memory. There's more to the ink realm than you realize, dear Mariah.
Joey told her.
And I have more regrets than anything.
What? Maria was perplexed. What was happening? What was Joey trying to say? Before she could get any more answers, Joey seemed to vanish in a blink of an eye, like a ghost, or a long forgotten memory. Maria shook her head, trying to understand it all, before reluctantly moving forward. The studio was, to say the least, quite large. There were messages written in ink along the walls. Some said, "The machine must endure," and another said, "Dreams come true." And one she came across read, "Please don't kill me." It looked as if something inky had been clawing at the wall, or perhaps pleading. She reluctantly walked past it, studying her surroundings. This part of the studio seemed more technical, as if Gent had come in and reconfigured the area. Everything felt off in a way, and she was suddenly stricken by a mysterious migraine. Then she caught sight of a poster featuring Wilson with the slogan, "Wilson knows your purpose." Mara didn't know how to react. Wilson's facial expression was unnerving. It felt as though the poster was staring into her soul. Disturbed, she tried to walk away as quickly as possible. As she continued down the hall, the atmosphere felt confined, yet comfortable, as if something was trying to keep out those who didn't belong, while welcoming those who did. Mariah walked down the hall when suddenly a strange, deformed version of Charlie from the Butcher Gang tried to squirm out of a vent, but just as quickly it stopped moving altogether and was dragged back into the vent. Mariah stood there frozen in shock and slight fear. After a few minutes, she finally managed to move again, but this time with much more caution, glancing over her shoulder every so often. She could have sworn that something was watching her. Eventually, she leaned against the wall, her migraine worsening. She slid down the wall and onto the floor. Looking at her surroundings once more, she took in the dark hall, the yellow wallpaper, the yellowed floors, and the ceiling before she collapsed flat on the floor. The last thing she heard was something walking, the sound of hooves echoing on the wood, followed by a mysterious voice saying,
Tell me, do you know where you are? Where you are so conveniently passed out?
The voice growled, not expecting a response. There could have been other things said, but Mariah didn't hear them.